I do think that a lot of people overthink everything. Like, oh, they're going to get this presentation just perfect. I'm going to want everything to be just perfect and exact. And we have to do things a certain way. And I'm like, oh my God, wait, sit down. Well, I'm just a normal person.
Hi, I'm Hannah Bloking.
Hi, I'm Allison Macklick, and we are 4 Under 3, the creators of Imposter Talks and our Imposter Syndrome Workshop. And today we have a very special guest. This man is a leader in the solution engineering world. He is a force at ServiceNow, Mr. Jeff Margolese. Welcome to the show, by the way. Tell us who you are, your journey, and then we'll get started.
Yeah. Hey, hi, Allison and Hannah. Thanks for having me. We are the defining enterprise software company of the 21st century, self-professed by our CEO, but I'm okay with that. And have worked here for about 8.5 years and get the fortunate pleasure of running our pre-sales, or what we call our solution consulting organization over here. And I live in Dallas, Texas, as you do as well. So get to see you in person every once in a while.
Yes, which is always a fun treat.
Well, we are so honored to have you as a former ServiceNow SA. This is like a very big honor for me, Jeff, to be able to ask you some of these questions. So you've got this big job. You've got this big personality. Like, I feel like I know you without knowing you because of your voice on LinkedIn. So can you talk to us a little bit about imposter syndrome, just right off the cuff? When you hear imposter syndrome, what does it mean to you?
I can't profess that I completely understand it per se, because I don't know that I necessarily would experience some of it. Although maybe we'll delve into a little bit of that in a sec. But you see it, I think, in two big ways. One, the sort of the professional world, and I think a little bit even in your so-called personal lives, although they seem to be fairly interconnected these days. But you see with especially, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say it's with the younger generation, although I think it's maybe a little bit more prevalent there, where they're like, oh, am I even qualified for this job? Do I know what I'm doing? Et cetera, et cetera. Or unfortunately, I think you see it more on the personal side of social media, where I think there's just like, oh, am I thought of in a certain way? Or I like this person on Instagram, not the person, but their post or whatever you call it. I don't feel like that. And you're worried about what they think about it and what they think about you and the visual sides of it. It's like, oh my God, it's like the whole world has just gone into this feeling of I'm not valued the way they think they should be. And I think that that's a difficult thing. And especially in the working world, when you start seeing that, it's a tough thing to contend with for sure.
Yeah. So I know when we were at lunch, we were talking about it. And I would say, just from being your friend and knowing how you lead, different things like that, instead of it applying to you per se, tell us about a time that you've helped a team member or a colleague, or you're seeing something in them that they might not see and helping them bring it out. Because that could be like an imposter that they're feeling that you're kind of helping them. Do you have an example like that?
Yeah, I don't think I have a very specific one, but I can give you more of a general sense of what I typically see when because I see this all the time. I do think that a lot of people overthink everything. Like, oh, they're going to get this presentation just perfect, or actually this will happen a lot. I have a big team, so I meet all kinds of people across the company, and they get this sense like I'm going to want everything to be just perfect and exact, and we have to do things a certain way. And I'm like, oh my God, wait, sit down. Well, I'm just a normal person, like like everybody else around here. Let's quit acting like there's something special going on just because I'm walking in the room. And then, the more help around that, and I think Allison, I've done a little bit of that with you. I try to tell people, listen, just be authentic, be you. Stop trying to be something that you think other people might want you to be. And play to your strengths of your own personality. Don't try to modify your personality because you don't think it plays well in the public forums or whatever. Play to whatever personality strengths you might have. I always take it as a somewhat compliment when anybody says like, oh, it's just, you're so authentic and it's just so casual and normal. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm kind of like that. So
This is like hitting home so much for me because I feel like I'm a professional overthinker. And like, I almost wish that, especially earlier on in my career, some senior leader had like shaken me and been like, stop overthinking it. You've got talent. You know what you're talking about. Just go. And a
Yeah.
lot of what we talk about in our workshops and hear from a lot of feedback is like, if your imposter wasn't talking to you right now, what could you do? So maybe if like you have a big business that you're running, what could your business be doing if people weren't sitting there worrying about a perfect presentation for you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we'd be more efficient, right? Although you don't want people just like showing up and go, "Well, I'll just kind of figure it out." Although I probably did a lot, but maybe that's just my own stuff. But yeah, I think it's good to care. So you don't want to confuse the two. That you don't care that you just should show up and do whatever you want. Um, but again, I just really believe play your own strengths, and then I know for me, it's more of a personal philosophy, and again everybody should look within themselves and find their own strengths and weaknesses and play to them up and down however you think you see fit. But like a perfect example for me, I truly have sort of lived my life by this mantra of like things will work themselves out if you have the skills, you have the confidence in yourself, and you're in the right environment. Sometimes you might not be in the right environment, and that can happen. Then eventually the answer will come to you, that the solution will be there, the problem will eventually get solved, right?
One thing I feel like since meeting you, I met you when I was on maternity leave, I think in 2020,
Yep.
maybe 2019. And I knew how personable and how wonderful you were from like right when James introduced us from Pre-Sales Collective. And I didn't know almost like your level, I guess, right off the bat, because you just were an authentic guy. I was like, this is a good dude. I like this guy, like instantly. And then I went and like stalked you on LinkedIn and understood. And it almost kind of released something in me personally. I used to be, oh, I need to be very professional to come across. And I think you kind of, for me, like kind of freed me from that. Like I'm silly and I'm going to be silly at work and I know my stuff, but I can still be a human and be authentic. So I've never told you that, but thank you. Cause it kind of like released something for me.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I felt the same way too, Allison. So don't worry about that. Although I was probably more nervous than you were. I'll tell you a funny story. All right. So I just, as I mentioned to you before, I went on this big world tour, et cetera. So I'm actually down in our Sydney office, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks ago. And like one of the things I like doing when we go to our, and we have a pretty big office down in the city, I like sitting like in the cube areas, right? I don't need some special office. And by the way, they're like, "Oh no, we got you an office." I'm like, "No, can I sit in those cubes over there?" Right? They just said open space. And I was like, if I need to take a private call, I'll get up and I'll do that. So anyway, I'm just sitting there. I'm like, "Hey, I need to catch up with just some email real quick. So just give me like 10 minutes and we'll move out to whatever meeting we're going to go do." And there was a whole bunch of people kind of sitting around me, and I'm just kind of doing some work. But I happened to hear the guy sitting next to me, and I'm listening. All of a sudden, like, what's he talking about? And he turns out he's an inside sales rep working for ServiceNow, and he's cold calling. He's down and smiling, like smiling down. I'm like, wow, you don't see that very often these days, right? So I'm like kind of just listening, and he's trying to pitch one of our more complicated products. And he's doing pretty good. It's pretty impressive. So he gets off and I just go, "Hey, that was pretty good, All right, thanks, whatever." It moves on. Then the woman sitting behind him, she kind of comes over, starts talking to him, and they're trying to figure out what kind of prospects should we go after. And they're doing all this research. And I'm kind of like, this is pretty cool to see. I don't see that very often. And then I lean over and I go, "Well, you should probably look in these kind of areas, XYZ, whatever. It doesn't matter what I said." And they're like, "Oh, you seem to know a lot about that." I'm like, "Oh, I know a little bit, whatever." And we just kind of got to talking to the inside sales rep. She looks down at my badge and she's trying to read my name. I could see, and she can only see my first name. And she's like, "I kind of know you a little bit, but I don't really know who you are. What do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm Jeff. I'm just an SC on the local team here." And by the way, the VP's sitting right next to me. He leans over and he's like, "Are you kidding me? Are you not going to say anything?" No, I'm an SC, right? That's just what I do. So I think to your point a little bit, for one, I like doing that just to have fun and see people's reactions, because I could care less what my title is and all this BS that people get hung up on. But I like seeing what people are really like, and let's not get into this maybe defensive posture that might have with some title and some role I might have.
Yeah, 100%.
I love that because we do have a lot of listeners who are early stage, mid stage career. And I think the idea, especially at larger companies where you're oftentimes very far away from an executive in your organization, it's nice to hear that, like how personable you are and how it's okay to have a real conversation with your executive. So I love that. So on that note, if you could think of one takeaway, if you think about that audience listening to this conversation, what would be your one key takeaway for somebody that's battling with imposter syndrome, afraid?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I just go back to that. Know yourself. You know, but respect your craft. And it doesn't matter what you do for a living, right? We have to be in this pre-sales world that we all love, et cetera. You could be a sales rep, you could be a coder, I don't care what you do for a living, but respect your craft in and around that. I know, like an example for our teams, I'm like, well, that means understand a bit about the broad economics in the world that you live around. Maybe if you're working with a certain customer base that's a bunch of banks, well, what's going on in banking a little bit? And then obviously know what you do for a living in two respects. Again, for us as pre-sales people, hey, you should kind of know what our products do and why the value proposition exists. You should be able to demo them fairly well. You don't have to be an expert though, but respect the craft. That there's more than just what's sitting in front of you. And the reason I say that is because it gives you a lot of confidence, so that when you get into that environment and someone throws you that curveball of like, well, that's not exactly what I'm thinking about. Allison, how does this work? Or Hannah, what do you think about that? You maybe have a little bit of a broader purview and you can have a bigger conversation that maybe you can even turn around to something different, that helps you in your sales cycle and your coding. So well-rounded knowledge, know what you're doing. And then I think that should provide the confidence that you can kind of go in and handle most situations. Like I know for me now, so you joked about the off the cuff thing, right? And that's definitely my personality, by the way. I'm not a big planner of sorts, but if you have confidence yourself, backgrounds and some broad knowledge, then I kind of always feel I can handle most situations or say, hey, I don't know, but I'm going to get back to you.
Yes, that is one of my favorite things. We actually, when Hannah and I worked at Sprinkler together, so that's how we became friends. And we did this training where we had to say, the answer is no. And then just pause and just sit in that, because it's okay to not be an expert on every single thing, but kind of taking it more high level to have that confidence. I think even customers want to see that too, in you.
I really want to go back to something you just said. Like, one of the things that I talk to my teams a lot about is like, yes, we're in pre-sales. Yes, we're going out to talk to the customer. But the reality is you're probably not in the meeting where you're going to close the customer. So if they're throwing requirements at you, you don't have to know all of them. The best thing you can do is get to know the customer and walk away with 10% more information about that customer and how to help them. Because that's what make you the expert, not that you know.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. And I love that. And those are skills, but they're also things you got to get people real comfortable with being in and around that, because it's not so easy, right? Everybody wants to solve every problem. I'm a problem solver. Mm-hmm. That's not so easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we have some great nuggets. Thank you, Jeff, again for coming and talking to us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Imposter Talks.
Subscribe, like, and review our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And please follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube at 4under3.
And we want to hear your imposter story. If you're interested in being a guest, please email us at info@4under3.io. Thanks so much.